Pretty much exactly 100 days after the X-H2S, we now have the X-H2. Just two. It's 40.2 megapixels, it shoots 8K 30p, and it costs $500 less than the X-H2S. Still, this right here is a flagship model. Fuji's taking the double flagship approach here. Two variants, one for speed and one for resolution. Now, to be fair, I think most of us saw this one coming. Like, when the X-H2S was first announced, why would the successor to the X-H1 be called a 2S? That S was clearly there to make some sort of distinction, so it seems we got the speed version first, and the standard X-H2 here is actually the high-resolution version. This here shares the exact same hardware design as the X-H2S, so accessories are interchangeable. Same cooling fan, same battery grip, same battery, same dual card slots, CF Express Type-B and an SD. The only way you can tell them apart from the exterior is the lack of a shiny S badge up front and the model tag, of course. When I was filming product B-rolls for this review, I kept getting the feeling that I've already done this before. I mean, I could literally just reuse my B-roll from the X-H2S review and VFX out the S, but I'm not going to do that. Can I? Now, I won't be reviewing this camera from scratch because it shares so much in common with the 2S. It would be easier to start where their paths diverge. So let's focus on how this is different from the 2S. Now, at the core of these differences is the sensor resolution as well as the technology. The X-H2 has a 40.2 megapixel back illuminated sensor. The X-H2S, while lower in resolution, has a back illuminated stacked sensor. Now, stacked sensors have a tendency to cost more but always have the upper hand in terms of readout speeds, which in turn is one of the contributing factors to your continuous shooting speed. The two cameras are matched at 15 frames per second in mechanical shutter mode, but the 2S can go up to 40 frames per second in electronic shutter, while the X-H2 actually takes a step back in electronic shutter mode, being limited to 13 frames per second before having to resort to cropping. But that's not the only thing influenced by your sensor readout speeds. It's quite directly linked to rolling shutter artifacts as well, and that is especially a concern when shooting stills in electronic shutter mode on the X-H2. If there's too much movement in electronic shutter mode, it will distort your image. So if your style of shooting involves a lot of fast-moving subjects, my 2 cents would be to seriously consider the lower resolution but much faster X-H2S. But if resolution matters more to your work, then the X-H2 has an ability not present on the 2S, and that ability is Pixel Shift Multi-Shot Mode. This lets you combine 20 shots for quadruple the resolution, which is 160 megapixels on the X-H2. We've seen this before on the GFX bodies, but this is actually the very first time Fuji's brought that feature into the X series lineup. On the X-H2S, the maximum you can go in terms of shutter speed was 1/32,000 in electronic shutter mode. For some reason, on the new X-H2, you can hit 180 thousandths of a second. For perspective, I could shoot wide open f1.4 at ISO 1000 under sunlight with that shutter speed. 180K. Now the X-H2 I've got is pre-production and I've got no way of viewing the raw files, so I haven't done very in-depth tests relating to image quality and stills, but based on the JPEGs alone, low light performance on the X-H2 is actually not as bad as I thought it would be relative to the 2S. Over in the video department, the X-H2 is very exciting as well. This still is a flagship hybrid, 8K 30p internal ProRes. Absolutely insane. It does kind of sound like a recipe for overheating, but Fuji does say it can do 160 minutes of 8K continuously. And still, if you're very concerned, they do offer that fan accessory. For anyone brave enough to shoot ProRes 8K internally though, my 165GB Type-B card lets me record around 11 minutes in ProRes LT, just under 8 in 422, and if you're a ProRes HQ kind of person, 5 minutes. Now, unlike the X-H2S, the X-H2 does not do 4K in 120p, slower sensor readouts, but what it does have are two 4K modes. There's a standard mode for recording what I presume is pixel bin 4K, and a 4K HQ mode for 4K oversampled from 8K, and this is available in both UHD and DCI resolutions. In standard 4K mode, it goes up to 60p, and in HQ mode, you get essentially the same limitations as shooting in 8K, which means 30p max. And yes, this all works in ProRes. Now, the 4K HQ mode is quite impressive because for the same file size, you get a sharper 4K with less noise. However, the catch is, rolling shutter is worse in HQ mode, just like it is in 8K. But sort of as a counter argument, there will always be a 1.1x crop factor when shooting in standard 4K, which is not present in the HQ mode. There's a lot of fine print when shooting 4K on the X-H2. Supposedly, the X-H2S also has one-stop dynamic range advantage over the X-H2 when shooting in f-log 2. That's a lot of 2s. The 2S can also do 3x2 open gate in 6.2K. The X-H2 doesn't do open gate. And this is Fuji's dual flagship situation in a nutshell. Not the easiest decision to make, I know, and I can already hear that evil voice from the dark side saying just buy both of them. But to be fair, if Fuji did make a camera that combined the best of these two, I wouldn't be surprised if it cost twice as much. So while you're thinking over which one of these X-H2s to buy, why not check out the new 56 1.2 they just dropped, or perhaps one of my other videos.